Hi, in this video I'm going to do a quick demo of how to use our new multiband compressor plugin. So this is the plugin, and I don't want to talk too much about what multiband compression is because some of you will know that already, but I'll give a brief introduction. So if you look at it right now, it's in single band mode, and the controls you have in this bottom section are just the same controls you have on pretty much any compressor. And so when you start out using this plugin, I would recommend you just run it in single band mode and don't go to multiband unless you really know that you need it and you know what you intend to do there. And the reason is because when you go multiband, you can have up to 4 bands, and each of these bands, when you press on it, you can see these controls change color when you press. Each of these bands, when you press on them, gives you another 8 controls, so the complete set of controls that you have on the compressor for each band. So in total there are 32 knobs that you can be using here, and that's probably too much to just mess around with it and get to your sound, and that's why I recommend starting out in single band mode, and then if you find you need to go to 2 bands, go to 2, but don't go to 4 unless you really know that you need that much. So as you can see, you go to multiband just by pressing this plus, and it splits whichever band you're working on in half. So if I want to split this band, I press plus and that becomes 2 bands. And I press X to close down a band and go back to single band. This is the same really nice compression algorithm that we're using in our mix bus compressor, and we have another video we did a couple years ago showing how this is, as far as we know, the lowest noise compressor available on iOS, and in fact it beats all of the big compressors that we've tried on the desktop too, although I haven't tried, I know there are hundreds of them, so I haven't tried them all. When I say beats them, I mean compression is a matter of taste, but if we measure in terms of total harmonic distortion, this one is insanely clean. Which is probably that's probably a good thing for multiband compression, because usually we're not looking for a lot of aggressive character when we go multiband. We're looking for something that does it cleanly. Right, so the next thing I want to show you is how to set this up with sidechain. So what I've got here is, I've got Xeon playing a synth sound and going through the compressor on this track, and on the next track I have Tube AU, and I'm going to play some drums. Right, so pro tip for Tube AU: you can't close the window and still hear the sound, but you can drag it right off the edge of the screen like what I just did, and it will still keep playing. Should still keep playing. Are you still playing? Yeah, like that. So I've got these drums going in the background, and what I want to do now is run a sidechain. So I've got 3 sidechain modes. Sorry, the text here is cut off. This is a pre-release version. We'll have that fixed before we release. And the 3 modes are off. So when the sidechain is off, what happens is standard compression. So standard compression works like this. This plugin, the compressor, is going to measure the volume of its input, and if the volume of the input exceeds the threshold volume, it will push the volume down. So it's a volume limiting compressor. And that's the standard way that all compressors work. Now when you use it in sidechain mode, what you're doing is you're saying, forget about what the volume of this is. I want to measure the volume of this. And when this gets loud, then I'm going to turn this down. So you're measuring the volume of one thing, but adjusting the volume of a different thing. And this is how we do that. In AUM, you go to Insert Effects, and you don't take Audio Unit Extension. If I did that, you can see the compressor is here, but now if I do this, I'll be compressing the drums, and that's not what I'm looking for. So instead, you go to the bottom where it says Multibus Audio Unit Instances, and I select this. So this is a link back to this. It's not a new instance of the effect. It's the same, it's like a pointer. Both of these are pointing to the same window. And you can see when I press them, you can see this bar down here lights up to indicate that they're both the same window. So now, if I go to single band sidechain, you can see these meters bouncing, and they are bouncing with the drums. So I'm turning that off so you don't hear it, but because the sidechain input happens before the audio output, the compressor is still getting this data even though you're not hearing it. So the drum is kicking there, and the compressor is measuring that, and what will happen is when this input volume exceeds my threshold volume, then it will compress, but it's going to compress on this track, not that track. So let's engage this and see what happens. And you can hear it bouncing in time with the music. And we have these two modes. This is single band mode, and this is full spectrum mode. And because, I'm going to mute this, because the compressor is operating in single band mode, there's no difference between single band and full spectrum. But if I go to a second band, now you'll hear a difference. What's this? Full spectrum, single band, full spectrum, single band. So what's the difference between these two? Well, a good way to hear this is let's mute the bass track and just listen the bass frequencies and just listen to the compression on the high frequencies. So let's put the sound back in. All right, what's going on here is when I select full spectrum, this sound, if you listen to it, it's mostly just bass. There are some parts of the track where there's hi-hat, but right now there's nothing except bass. So the sidechain input is getting mostly bass, and then using that to compress the high frequencies. If I select full spectrum, then what's going to happen is it's going to take this bass-heavy input and use that as the sidechain input to compress the high frequencies. But if I select single band, it does something different. When I select single band, the sidechain input in this frequency range is being used to compress these frequencies. So that gives us a very different sound because, especially if I take this up a little bit, now I'm at 1200 hertz. Let's hear that again. Full spectrum, single band. So when I go single band, I'm mostly compressing based on the top part of the bass drum and then the hi-hat, which is playing sometimes and not playing other times. But when I go full spectrum, because the bass is the strongest volume thing in this drum track, I'm going to be mostly compressing based on the bass. So I hope that made it clear what's the difference between these two. Just to summarize it one more time, if you go single band, then the sidechain is taking the sidechain input from each frequency band that you have and using that to do the compression. But if you go full spectrum, it's taking the whole everything and using that to compress each individual band. That's almost all I wanted to say about this plugin. There's just one more thing we might talk about, and that is that if you look closely in the background, you can see there's this spectrum view which is bouncing up and down. And what you have there is both the input and the output. And this is really clearly seen if you mute a band. So you can see when I mute this blue band, the green part of the spectrum drops down because the green is the output. And you see the input, having this full volume, but the output is lagging down behind because this bass frequency is muted. And I put it back on, and now you see the volume back up. So that's just a way for you to see spectrally, as you do this multiband compression, what's actually happening. And I think that's all I want to show you for now about this plugin. I'm sorry I didn't do any audio demos. That will have to come in another video because we'll probably want to go into more detail about the sound quality, and probably do some comparisons with some other apps. So for now, we'll end there. If you want to buy this app, there'll be a link in the description to the App Store. And if you like these kind of videos and you want to see more of it, please hit subscribe, or if you're watching on Facebook, like our Facebook page. And then finally, if you just want to help us because you're nice, hit like for us so that YouTube or Facebook will prioritize our channel and our videos. Thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.